This episode of Trifles is made possible by listeners like you who support us on Patreon and Substack. To learn more, go to patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the lodger was veiled, the face was yellow, and the valley was fearsome, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder what kind of medical practice Dr. Watson actually ran? Or about the number of Holmes's monographs? Or how much the rent was at 221B Baker Street?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Bert Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 445, 100 Pounds. Well, hello and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we look at the details in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Wolder.
Bert, you look like 100 pounds.
Well, thanks so much. I look, British and wrinkled, I suppose, is what you're... Like I just slipped out of somebody's wallet. Okay.
Oh, well, let's hope it's your wallet for everyone's sake.
Yeah.
Well, we have a fascinating show for you once again, looking at the role of 100 pounds in the Sherlock Holmes stories. It's one we've kind of noted for a while but haven't picked up on, and we finally had the motivation to do it. And it's not because we had a 100-pound donor on Patreon or Substack, although we would welcome that. You can support the show for as little as $1 a month, which I think comes in at a fraction of a pound a month. I don't know what the going rates are, but the good news is you have options. You can see us on Patreon or on Substack, and it is in your local currency if you happen to be overseas. I'm just giving the U.S. equivalent, the $1 a month or $5 a month over on Substack. We do have thank you gifts for people, and I wanted to drop this hint for everyone to stay tuned later this summer because we are going to have a small merch store opening with Trifles merch, some stuff or at least one thing that you can purchase. And the proceeds of those purchases will again go to support the show. So if you're not in the mood to subscribe and support us on a monthly or on an annual basis, you can do it on a one-time basis through the purchase of some of our merchandise. So stay tuned for that. And of course, you can also help us out by leaving a rating or a review or a comment on this particular episode. It's all about getting involved in the community. And we appreciate hearing your voice, however you choose to use it. Bert, we promised to talk about 100 pounds with people. And we were looking at it specifically through a particular lens, looking at the 100-pound amount. What is that lens and why does it matter?
Yeah, when you suggested this topic, that's what occurred to me. What is that lens? And why on earth no, it's a wonderful yardstick because there's so much activity about money in the canon of Sherlock Holmes. Sometimes we hear about great sums, hundreds of thousands of pounds, tens of thousands of pounds. And yet, in the cases of Sherlock Holmes, and from the first time we meet Holmes in A Study in Scarlet, we know from Watson that he has an extraordinarily wide group of clients, particularly in his early days, who come with him for small amounts and this, that, and the other thing. But one number does seem to recur, 100, 100, 100. And so we thought we would look at that. And it's interesting, too, when you overlay a lens of purchasing power. Because 100 pounds, let's say you pick the year 1899, right before the turn of the century there, it's equivalent in purchasing power. Now, you look at these numbers about inflation and this, that, and the other thing. But if you want to do an analysis based on purchasing power, 100 pounds in 1899 equals over 16,000 pounds in purchasing power today. So it's been it was important then, and it's important now.
It is not a trifling sum
No.
to be thrown around. It is fairly significant. And of course, we look at the income of individuals back then. A number of the young ladies in particular were able to get by on 100 pounds a year. Or even look at our friends, the Stoner sisters from the Speckled Band. They had an annual income from the trust or the will that was left to them by their dear mother of, I believe it was 750 pounds a year. So, a fairly significant sum. And of course, the idea behind that story was that as long as they lived with their stepfather, he got to partake in that money as well. But as soon as they left and got married, a portion of it went with each of the daughters there, the sisters. So he had every incentive to make sure that those additional hundreds of pounds were coming in. In terms of 100 here and pulling the wool over people's eyes, I wanted to maybe start with a softer reference, as it were. Effie Monroe and the yellow face. Of course, she did not disclose to her husband that she had a daughter that she was seeing or keeping with them. He did know that she had been married to a fellow by the name of John Hebron and that he had passed away. But that her property was shared then with Jack Monroe. He said that when we married, my wife made over all her property to me, rather against my will, for I saw how awkward it would be if my business affairs went wrong. He said, I'm a hop merchant myself and have an income of 700 or 800. We find ourselves comfortably off. But then she came to him about 6 weeks before this case and said, Jack, when you took my money, you said that if I ever wanted any, I was to ask you for it. He said, certainly, it's all your own. She said, well, I want 100 pounds.
Yeah.
I was a bit staggered at this, for I imagined it was simply a new dress or something of the kind that she was after. What on earth for? He wanted. She said, she said, you said that you were only my banker, and bankers never ask questions, you know. So she wanted 100 pounds for, ostensibly, for what purpose?
Yeah, good question. That's what he wanted to know.
For food, I would imagine, to set the cottage up comfortably for her daughter. Any supplies that she might need along the way, and perhaps for any help that she might have in overseeing her daughter, taking care of her daughter. But that's, as you said, the equivalent at this point would be 16,000 a year, which is not insignificant.
Well, we know too from the cases of Sherlock Holmes that, for example, from Copper Beech's Violet Hunter had been currently employed at £4 a month, wasn't it? That was Violet Hunter's prior salary. And of course, here's another case of introducing the 100 pounds sort of casually. But if £4 a month is going to pay for a governess, you could say that Effie is putting together, a very good plan for a year to maintain her child.
Yeah. Yeah. So 100 pounds for the sake of keeping her secret safe, kind of pulling the wool over Jack Monroe's eyes. But why don't we launch into that other story you just mentioned there, Bert? And with Violet Hunter.
Well, Violet Hunter, she is a very interesting character. And I particularly keep coming back to Violet Hunter again and again for various reasons. But there she is without family, a very Watsonian character. very much isolated, no one to go to for advice. And so she asks Sherlock Holmes, should I take this position? Which, on the face of it, baffles him a little bit, but not until he begins to hear the details. Because if you can get a governess who is normally making £4 a month and they offer her £100 a year, that is significant. There must be some reason why this particular governess is worth so much.
Well, it's because she had excellent taste in clothes.
I say, my dear, you're a size 6, aren't you? Oh, 4, perhaps. Yes, you'll do nicely. But that hair.
Yes.
I am applying for a job of a governess, aren't I? Oh, yes, of course you are. Yes.
Well, clearly, this was an individual that Jeffro, the other J, Jeffro Rucastle was looking at. And I'm sure while her curriculum vitae was impeccable, the chestnut hair that she had that happened to match that of his daughter, Alice, was probably more striking to Mr. Rucastle. So it became, we must secure this governess at any cost, and that cost became the irrefutable £100.
I always thought it had something to do with her network of close associates, about whom we hear nothing. She does tell Sherlock Holmes that she had a little French and a little German, but we don't know who those people were and what became of them and why they let her go alone to the Copper Beaches near Winchester.
Well,
a mystery.
Maybe she was the prototype for Snow White. She had a little French, a little German.
A little sleepy, a little dark, a little dopey. Yeah.
We are grateful they did allow her out, because that helped us to get this marvelous story. But once again, £100 was enough to see her through.
Yeah. And there's another one, too, with the stockbroker's clerk with Hall Pycroft. Here is a guy who is, basically out of the blue asked to take this new position with this company and is somewhat befuddled by it. And what he says is, well, look, I have to be frank with you. Mawson, my current employer only gives me 200, but Mawson is safe. And I know so little about your company. And what do the evildoers do? Ecstatically, he says, you were the very man for us. Quite right. Now, here's a note for £100. And if you think that we can do business, you may just slip it into your pocket as an advance upon your salary. Wow.
Yeah, because the salary they were offering him, they said, we can only offer you a beggarly 500 to start with. Just, 2.5 times what you're earning right now.
Yeah.
Just say, you'll have to make do. Clearly, they were not going to pay him 500 a year.
No.
But that 100 was enough to kind of secure the con.
Yep.
We talked on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere with Maria Konnikova about her book, The Confidence Game. And I think we talked with her.
Yes,
about that.
we
talked with her twice. And that's right, because we talked about these canonical cons. And it's very much in line with human psychology and human nature that, okay, they're making you this offer for 500. So already your head is in the clouds and you're thinking wildly about this. And then they put down a fraction of that, the £100, to secure you in that arrangement. Now, of course, the arrangement would never fully blossom. They just needed you at a certain place at a certain time. And once again, this was a similar kind of ruse that we saw with Jabez Wilson in the Red-Headed League. They just needed him out of the way, out of where he was supposed to be at a particular time, so they could do what they needed to do. And just as a reminder, in the Stockbroker's Clerk, the Mawson and Williams, which I believe is where he was going, had never seen him, had never seen Hall Pycroft, so they didn't know what he looked like. So, of course, Harry Pinner here could show up as Hall Pycroft and, kind of run the ruse from the inside while the real Hall Pycroft was working for this Franco Midland hardware company.
Yeah.
So, but they got him for £100.
They did. And if Hall Pycroft had realized the economic scale of events and deals and proposals in the world of Sherlock Holmes, he should have turned to them and said, "What do you take me for? A governess?"
Well, it's funny because we have a Hall Pycroft right here, but it's only because we moved it out of the living room.
Well, it belongs in the hall.
It does. It's a Hall Pycroft.
You should have figured it out. Yeah. I mean,
Where
they
else?
put labels on these things for a reason,
Yeah, oh, of course. What else do we see with £100 that comes into some kind of ruse or situation where someone is trying to cover something up?
Well, it comes along in lots of different ways. You can infer it here and there, and there are commentaries about £100. For example, when Holmes in Blue Carbuncle is talking about really his own cleverness in making a bet to get the information that he needed, he comments that if I had £100, I probably wouldn't have gotten the information from Breckenridge. But also, it sneaks in other places. So, in a case of identity, I noticed we've got Mary Sutherland, the typist who has become besotted with Hosmer Angel, and she has money left to her by her Uncle Ned in Auckland, in New Zealand stock. And she explains all of this and what the amount is, and she can only draw the interest. And Holmes says, "You interest me extremely. And since you draw so large a sum as 100 a year, with what you earn into the bargain, blah, blah, blah." And he says, by the way, "I believe a single lady can get on very nicely upon an income of about £60. So there's another note that Mary Sutherland is percolating along nicely on £100 a year.
Oh yeah, that's a great reference there. I like that. Also, we think about the case of disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax. We had Holy Peters, right? Reverend Schlesinger, the foe in this story, and Holmes approaches him and wants to know what he's done with her, because he has a suspicion that Schlesinger has kidnapped and perhaps done away with Lady Frances Carfax. And Schlesinger, Holy Peters, he kind of plays it coy. And I said, "I'd be very glad if you could tell me where she might be. I'll bill her. I have a bill against her for nearly £100 and nothing to show for it, but a couple of trumpery pendants that the dealer would hardly look at." So, they're staying at the hotel in Switzerland, or is it in France? I forget where they were. Baden. They were in Baden-Baden.
Twice as bad.
Yes, so maybe it was £50 she owed him, and he doubled it. But she was hanging with the Schlesingers.
Yes,
which would make a great title for a TV show.
Hanging with the Schlesingers.
And must have been part of their a meal companion, a drinking companion, etc. And ran up a bill, and that was the complaint against Lady Frances that, of course, Holy Peters was using as a ruse to profess innocence in front of Sherlock Holmes.
Yep. Well, and then we have, other cases. For example, Jabez Wilson and the Red-Headed League. And Jabez Wilson gets involved in this £4 a week operation whereby he is copying out of encyclopedias. And he consults Holmes because this is all stopped, which he can't fathom. And he's very interested in finding out why. But he's been doing it for 8 weeks. And so he's managed to compile 32 pounds. Why, that seems almost a third of 100 pounds.
Yeah, well, it does. Well, annualized, if he was getting 4 pounds a week, that would be a little over 200 pounds.
Plenty of money.
That Wilson would have gotten, which is that's a nice deal when you consider it, almost Mawson and Williams territory.
Yeah.
But it only had to go on for as long as it took to dig the tunnel, which in this case was 8 weeks. So those villains got away with a fairly reasonable sum. It's a bargain when you're dealing with a pawnbroker versus a stockbroker.
That's right. As long as your credit's good.
Yeah, right.
And that's just a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
Your salary with me, madam, would commence at £100 a year.